Do you catch yourself pondering when exactly one of the most common chants in all of wrestling first popped up in a building? And does the truth behind exactly when the name of one particularly iconic finisher was born keep you up at night? Well, it's time to discover a ton of quite compelling and frequently mind-blowing answers, folks. I'm Gareth, this is What Culture Wrestling, and here are 10 unexpected wrestling origins that'll blow your mind. Number 10, This Is Awesome first showed up as a mocking chant in TNA. Of the many noises that tend to erupt from the live crowd during just about any wrestling show nowadays, one of easily the most common is the three-word roar of "This is awesome." At the sight of everything from humans falling off the top of gigantic ladders to two people engaging in yet another brutal chop-off. But when did this chant of approval first pop up in the world of wrestling? Well, according to Dave Meltzer of the Wrestling Observer newsletter, the very first time folks started to chant about a bout being awesome was during a Monsters Ball match at TNA's Victory Road pay-per-view in 2004. However, rather than fans cheering about how superb the action was, this chant was actually reportedly sarcastically created in response to the quote-unquote bad match that was going down that night. From here, though, those who heard the chant that night began to use it in a more positive way at Full Impact Pro events, with it then becoming more popular as fans brought it to Ring of Honor. Meltzer specifically recalled it being heard during the Samoa Joe vs Kenta Kobashi October 1st, 2005 match in New York City. One of the most famous audible salutes in the game. And it all remarkably started as a way of mocking the action in between the ropes. Now I've got a quick question for you. Is "This Is Awesome" the best or worst chant in wrestling history? And while you're at it, you let me know what your favourite chants are in the comment section down below. Number 9, Finn Balor's Giant Origins. Before he arrived on the Black and Gold brand all those years ago, this eventual Judgment Day man actually went by the name of Prince Devitt in New Japan Pro Wrestling. When he did ultimately make that jump over to WWE and NXT in 2014 though, Devitt was no more. The star would now be known as Finn Balor. But this wasn't simply a case of throwing two somewhat Irish and cool sounding names together and just hoping they would stick, folks. It turns out that both of these names have quite the background, with Finn being inspired by Fionn Mac Cumhale, or Finn McCool as he is also known, a giant, heroic warrior in Irish mythology who, according to legend, was responsible for creating the Isle of Man. And how did he do it? By launching a piece of the Irish coast into the ocean. As you do. The sometimes rather demonic former NXT champion's Balor name is also connected to some supernatural beings in Irish mythology, with Balor being the one-eyed giant leader of the Fomorians. And what happens when said eye is opened? The eradication of whatever it is looking at, apparently. You'll no doubt remember FB boasting a big old yellow eye on his painted body at SummerSlam 2016, something that was likely a nod to his name's origins. He may be just shy of 6 foot tall in reality, but this Demon King's moniker has bigger origins than you likely ever realized. Number 8, Sweet Chin Music fell out of a baseball game. While the star himself would later admit to Sports Illustrated that he was inspired to use a super kick by gentleman Chris Adams, it was Shawn Michaels who would ultimately go on to become the person most people think of whenever they see that particular kind of boot to the face. The Heartbreak Kid would eventually opt for a different name for his specific super kick, of course, christening it the Sweet Chin Music. And as he'd later explained to Sony Sports India, Michaels actually came up with that name whilst watching a bit of baseball many moons ago. Noting how his character evolved and grew over the years, HBK recalled seeing Roger Clemens launch some fastballs in baseball and hearing announcers then calling these particular throws towards the batter's face, a tactic often used to intimidate the person swinging at the ball, a little Sweet Chin Music that would back the batter off the plate. Michaels took the name to Vince Russo soon after, and the pair agreed it would be an effective way to separate HBK's finishing kick from your average super kick, and the rest was chin smashing history. Number 7, the shocking origins of the Mandible Claw. On the subject of the unexpected origins of some of wrestling's most iconic finishing moves, they don't come much more mind-blowing than the birth of the Mandible Claw eventually used by the likes of Mick Foley and the late Bray Wyatt. Though the bloke behind the Mankind mask is perhaps the most well-known user of the sickening submission move, Foley is quick to note how he didn't actually create this hold. Instead, as he'd explain on his Foley is Pod podcast, that move was actually given to Foley by Jim Cornette in the early 90s, with the latter figure soon revealing the history of Dr. Sam Shepard to Mick. Back in the 50s, Shepard was convicted of the murder of his wife, but that decision was eventually overturned in 19 1966, with a shepherd serving a life sentence being found not guilty and released from prison. Along with his story inspiring the TV show and movie versions of The Fugitive, a free shepherd also ended up stepping into the world of pro wrestling in the years post-release, after starting a relationship with the daughter of wrestler George Strickland. The Doctor, known as Killer Sam Shepherd in between the ropes, became quite the attraction due to his notoriety, and even went on to create a vicious submission known as the mandibular nerve pinch, a move that ultimately inspired Mrs. Foley's baby boy's own Claw of Doom. Number 6, where the term mark came from. Long before professional wrestling was selling out stadiums, this particular form of entertainment could be found going down at American carnivals in the 1800s. The term carny, used when referring to those individuals found trying to pull a fast one on colleagues and employees within the wrestling industry today, originated from said early carnival days. And those US carnival beginnings also saw the use of another somewhat negative term that is still used today. You've likely heard a few people within the business refer to some fans as marks over the years, with the word often being used as a way of mocking those who are so very invested in the wrestling and storylines unfolding on screen. Back in the day though, marks were punters picked out by dodgy carnival operators due to them seeming quite gullible. The word eventually went on to mean the same as a sucker, with these poor souls being literally marked secretly with some chalk as a way of informing other operators that they could squeeze a little more money out of these easily deceived faces. Nowadays though, trying to take the mick out of anyone just happily connecting to the tales being told on screen feels like a bit of an a-hole move really. There's nothing wrong with marking out from time to time, folks. Cheers for checking out this video today, and hit that subscribe button down below for more What Culture Wrestling on your screen. Number 5, the insecticide origin of the DDT. Another performer who would eventually become synonymous with one of the most popular moves in all of wrestling. The origins of Jake Roberts' brutal DDT are as peculiar as the Snake himself often was on screen. While Roberts wasn't technically the first person to use this particular move, that was Mexican performer Black Gordman who used it throughout the 70s. Jake's version of it actually first went down in between the ropes entirely by chance. The wrestling legend would later recall to Chris Van Vliet that he literally stumbled on the move after an opponent stood on his foot and they fell backwards. What a happy accident. And when it came time to name his new face frontlock head smashing attack, Roberts ultimately found himself being inspired by a newspaper whilst having breakfast one morning. He read here the words US government outlaws DDT, with DDT actually standing for, wait for it, dichlorodypheny-trichloroethane is what I'm gonna go with, because that is a long word. And that's an insecticide that was being used on crops at the time. After giving it a little thought, Roberts felt DDT perfectly suited his new match-ending weapon, and the poisonous name is still being used to this day. Number 4, the truth behind Bayley's name. Unlike the rest of her fellow WWE horsewomen, this one-time damage control leader has never been gifted a second name whilst performing as one of the top sports entertainers of her era. Instead, Bayley has remained just that for her entire WWE run, becoming a Grand Slam champion, winning both the Royal Rumble and Money in the Bank, and producing countless other memorable moments as a mononym wonder. Originally though, this star actually went by the name of Davina Rose on the independent scene. That name would soon be dropped once she put pen to paper on a WWE deal in 2012, with the future champ being asked to come up with something different to use going forward. In the end though, as she'd later reveal on Talk Is Jericho, after handing in a list of potential names, she was given the choice of 3, and one of those names just so happened to be Bayley. Feeling it was the best of a bad bunch, the talented worker had one condition for accepting this new handle. It had to be spelt B-A-Y-L-E-Y. And why did she need the Y? Because Bayley was from the Bay Area, and she thought it was damn cool that she'd found a way to work that into her WWE name. So hugger and role model lovers have actually been secretly supporting the Bay Area all this time. That's how it works, right? Number 3, Shinsuke Nakamura's Rumble in the Jungle move. It's not just a performer's name that can sometimes be altered in the wake of joining up with a new company. After agreeing to join WWE in 2016, Shinsuke Nakamura's impactful Bomaye running knee to the face was renamed as the Kinshasa, and it wasn't long until that move earned him NXT Championship gold in his new home. What you may not have realised, however, is that both of these names are actually references to a rather iconic fight. You see, Ali Bomaye were actually the words chanted at Muhammad Ali and George Foreman back when the two collided in the Rumble in the Jungle in 1974. And after Antonio Inoki was given the Bomaye name by Ali following their own battle, Nakamura soon decided to name his devastating knee that as a tribute to the Japanese wrestling icon. However, the fact Bomaye translates to kill him in the Bantu language of Lingala was likely a big reason behind the Bomaye becoming the Kinshasa in WWE, with that name also being linked to the Rumble in the Jungle due to it being the capital city of Zaire, now the Democratic Republic of Congo, where the event occurred. Number 2, Sandman came from a surfer gimmick. Though a certain icon known as Sting may be the most famous surfer the wrestling business has ever known, he's actually not the only one. Bizarre as it may seem today, there was actually a point there when the bloke eventually found smashing beer cans against his skull, whacking people with kendo sticks, and storming into arenas to enter Sandman, was a performer often seen wearing a pair of shades and carrying around a surfboard. That's right, the reason Jim Fullington went by the name of the Sandman was largely down to the fact that he started out life in the industry behind a surfer gimmick. This Mr. Sandman character was eventually dropped after he began showing up in ECW in the mid-90s, with the call soon being made to have him embrace his own personality a little more, as he developed into a far more edgier character than that wetsuit warrior. But the Sandman name still stuck around, and will forever be a reminder of this hardcore icon's hugely unexpected surfing origins. Number 1, Mick Foley's Bang Bang came from the Love Shack. The Mandible Claw isn't the only part of the Mick Foley experience that boasts a pretty surprising origin. Along with throwing up a good old thumbs up and telling folks to have a nice day, this much-loved icon was also known for occasionally firing off a few imaginary bullets from his hands to the sound of bang bang. And if you ever wondered what possessed Mick to start shooting off into the sky after dropping an elbow or delivering another mesmerizing promo, it turns out that he was actually inspired by a rather popular tune. As he'd later explain on WWE Untold, a day before he lost his 2 top teeth in a car accident, Foley remembered wrestling Nasty Ned Brady in Greensboro, North Carolina, and it was during that match when he nailed Ned with one of those aforementioned elbows, only to suddenly feel the urge to unleash a few lyrics from the B-52's Love Shack. So that's what he did, even uttering an extra bang and on the door baby towards the camera. He would drop those additional elements going forward, but the explosive bang bang would remain. And as Foley himself put it, the more meaningful and more I believed in the gesture, the better the match was gonna be. So when those meaningful Love Shack guns came out to play, an epic showdown was typically never too far away, baby. Have you enjoyed this 10 unexpected wrestling origins that'll blow your mind video? Then hit this 10 crazy wrestler truths we just learned video too, because it is truly magnificent. Bye bye!